together on this, the 28th of February, 2018. Can we begin with the roll call?
Albritton.
Present.
Arndt. Present. Bowman.
Present.
Gaffney.
Here.
Gidding.
Here.
Moore.
Here.
Nazarko.
Here.
Swazer.
Present.
Deirdre Waterman. Patrice Waterman is excused.
Patrice indicated yesterday to us that she would not be in attendance today.
The mayor should come in a little later.
That's obvious, too.
Williams.
Present.
We have a quorum. Chair.
Let's go ahead and begin with public comment. Any comments from the public? Going once, going twice. All right. Item number 3, agenda changes.
Yes, sir. There are.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, the first one, under unfinished business, there is a resolution to correct the January meetings, but since those minutes have not been approved, we're just going to do the corrections as part of the consent agenda. So that resolution will be removed. And we will need to, in your handouts, there is a notice from Invesco regarding approved executives for the partnership. And as a partner, we need to sign off on an amendment to the limited partnership agreement. So we'll need to add that as an agenda item, as well as Invesco is asking us to sign off on their appointments to their investment advisory committee. And we'll need a resolution to approve Mr. Moore's signature on that.
Deborah, can I ask you to speak up some?
Yes, sir?
You can move closer to the mic.
Oh, the mic is on the end.
Oh, no. All right, is that it for agenda changes?
That's all I have. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right, then we'll move ahead to consent agenda.
I would move that we approve the consent agenda with the corrections to the minutes.
Support. All in favor? We had a move and we had a support.
Yeah.
I have a question
So,
Go ahead.
sure.
because I think there was a memo about, where's the accounts payable?
The accounts payable is under the consent agenda, and it's just before all of the financial reports. So it's right after.
Maybe I'll go to my notes then. So,
Okay.
It's Adelia Reed, the temporary office worker for accounts payable, or who is it?
Correct. No, Sedelia Reed is one of our retirees. Her mail was being returned, and we stopped her payment. She came into the office, completed an affidavit, and we cut our manual check.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
And the corrections to the minutes are in your handouts. The first one being to correct the healthcare plan that was approved from Plan C to Plan B. And then the second one is to the minutes on page 16 at the very bottom of the page. We're just striking that entire sentence.
Okay. So we had a move and support for the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Okay. All right. Item number 5 is consultants.
Let's see, just what's first on the agenda. Okay, so periodic rebalancing. All right. So first, you'll have a handout, it's our typical cash flow Excel sheet. And so for this month, we're recommending taking $6 million from Sawgrass and moving that to cash to pay for benefits and expenses. Now, if you recall, large cap is one of the areas where heavily overallocated, about $30 million. In the past 2 rebalances, we've taken it from Addix and PNC. The only other area to take it from is Sawgrass. It's either Addix or Sawgrass. So this time around, we'll take the $6 million. We're recommending taking the $6 million from Sawgrass and bringing that into cash.
It's an item under new business.
Okay.
Unless you have questions for Stephen.
That's new business.
The resolution is
Oh,
under new
okay, gotcha.
business. I'm sorry.
Hey,
So-
may I ask a question? When we take or move money from one manager to another, do we have any discussion with them prior to, or do we just notify them once it's done?
We notify them once it's done. All of the managers that we have are pretty long-standing managers, and they're familiar with the process that periodically we do need to raise cash. They've all been through the process, but we typically give them a week or two. Trading is T+2, but we generally give them a week or two's notice to raise the cash.
Yeah. Give them time to make their own trades and
Yeah.
transactions.
No, that's not my question. My
Okay.
question is, like, in this instance, when we are kind of, do we have any discussion prior to the meeting, or do we just meet and then we decide, then we let them know, and then they have a couple of weeks to effectuate the change?
That's correct. Once you approve it, we contact them and give them a couple of weeks to raise the cash.
So prior to the meeting, they won't know until it's actually moved along.
I wait until you approve things before I contact.
Okay, I got you.
Okay.
All right,
Question answered?
good.
Okay.
Yeah, all right. Okay. All right, so that was number 8. Number B under the consultants.
Yep, so number B would be target asset allocation. You all have a handout. It's stapled about 10 pages. It says global, international, and emerging markets. I believe it's in your packets.
For those non-finance committee members, it is a handout, and for the committee members, it's in their agenda. There's a copy in your agenda as well.
Okay. So if you turn to page 1, we'll just discuss the rationale and what we're talking about here. There you go. So page 1. So right now, our current asset allocation. On the bottom here, we have this light blue. It's international / global equity at 16.8%. If you recall, the target asset allocation that was approved doesn't have global equity in it. It has international and emerging markets. So one of our managers, First Eagle, is a global equity manager. And so what global equity is so First Eagle, they invest globally. They invest in the U.S. and international. We're looking to transition that from a fund or strategy that invests globally in U.S. and international to one that only invests in international, to go more in line with our target allocation of international.
Okay. So for non-practitioners, the words global and international probably mean the same, but in investment ease, if you will, global means that you invest in the U.S. and also stock exchanges outside the U.S. International means you're investing in stock exchanges outside the U.S. So right now what you have is a global mandate. So part of First Eagle's portfolio also has U.S. stocks and is expected to have a fair amount of U.S. stocks.
There could be overlap with those stocks versus our, in comparison to our large cap or mid cap.
Yep,
Right.
exactly. So on page 2, we discussed that a little bit on global versus non-U.S. or international, and our recommendation. So we recommend moving the funds from the First Eagle Global Fund to the First Eagle International Fund. So just aligning it more with our target allocation on our target benchmarks and our IPS. Now if you turn to page 3, you can see a comparison between the two funds. So the global fund, you see it's got 37% in the United States, which overlaps our current domestic managers, which we have our targets for. So we'd move that to the International Value Fund that is purely non-U.S. equities, non-U.S. stocks. Page 4 is just a comparison of the two funds. The fees are the same. It's the same strategy, similar team. It's just a function of now they can invest in U.S. stocks. Post-recommendation, post-change, they could only invest in non-U.S. stocks, the non-U.S. equities.
But we're looking at similar performance between
Yes.
the two.
So page 5 is a performance comparison of the two funds. And it's similar. It's a little bit better performance on the international value versus the global value. But it's time period specific. But it's similar.
Well, because otherwise I would wonder why we weren't thinking about a new manager altogether if we wanted to change the strategy. But if we're looking at a similar performance rate with a manager we're used to, then
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
And right now they pair fairly well with WCM, your other non-US manager, international manager. Because WCM is more focused and they're more growth oriented, where First Eagle is more value and protection on the downside oriented.
All right.
So that's our first recommendation in this packet.
Okay.
The second recommendation is we still don't have exposure to emerging market equity. Now that's one of the targets. We have a 5% target allocation that was approved in the allocation. Now emerging market equity, that's a step below in terms of the development scale in countries. So when you think of a developed international economy, you think of the UK, or you think of Germany or Italy. Developed. Emerging markets are typically China, Brazil, India, South Korea, Russia. These are countries that are developing, developing an economic system, an ecosystem, and moving up to a developed country. They're generally characterized by moving from sort of a farm-based economy to a service or technology-based economy. So that's a good way to view it. Now, the main pros and cons of emerging market equity. The pro is, over the long term, you're generally going to get you're going to get better performance than developed, because these are economies that are growing. They're growing faster in terms of the developed countries like the UK or Germany. The cons are, there's a little bit more volatility, right? So there'll be higher ups and higher downs, which is why we only have a 5% allocation to it. But over the long term, since we have long-term liabilities and long-term projections, over the long term, that short-term volatility smooths out, and we expect a return enhancement relative to developed countries. So our second Yep.
Stephen?
Mm-hmm.
What causes the volatility?
Mm-hmm. It's smaller countries, it's less liquid, and they're more prone to fits and starts in the economy, right? There could be coups. Egypt is considered an emerging market country, right? There could be a coup somewhere. There could be other economic issues because they're developing. They're not as developed as we are in terms of an economic system and ecosystem. So that could be one of them.
So emerging markets by their nature tend to be smaller end markets relative to developed markets, by and large. And the reason why I phrase it that way is because South Korea, I would assume every person in this room has something from South Korea, whether it's a washer, a dryer, a cell phone, or a TV. So that's a case that's a little bit different. But for instance, Russia is a country that's still rule of law. There is a big question mark there. Or China, where pretty much the government rules that country as well. But both of these countries, the great thing about them is that they still are increasing their industrial base. However, the stock markets, by and large, tend to be a little bit less developed than what you have in developed countries. And because of that, flow of capital going in and out of those markets creates greater volatility in their pricing. Now, the positive about emerging markets is when you look at them based on how much debt that they have relative to industrial countries, they actually are, as a group, in a better shape than industrial countries because they live through more dramatic changes. So for some of you, you may remember 1998, where you had something called the Thai baht as well as Russia default, and that kind of affected throughout emerging markets. 2008 also affected emerging markets because when the US sneezes, the emerging markets feel the effect as well. So that forced all of them to refocus their economies, pay down their debts, and they're actually better financed now relative to industrial countries. So on a valuation basis, actually, emerging markets look pretty attractive also.
Are we investing any money in Russia?
We would leave that decision up to the emerging manager. Mm-hmm. So we personally would not.
Can I ask one other question? Coming out of Washington, of course, especially the president is, he keeps talking about the imbalance in trade. And wanting to do some things to turn that, turn that around. Do you see that that might have an effect on these emerging markets?
Yes. Short answer is yes. It could affect it, but we don't know what the effect is going to be yet because you can't manage legislation. As you recall, when he was elected, he had great fanfare saying that we're going to have all these renegotiated trade agreements.
Right.
Nothing's happened yet. So the managers, what they'll say is that they are really more focused on the companies that primarily probably go internally rather than externally. So for instance, in China, there are a ton of companies that trade internally. You have companies like Google that only focus in China, and their market capitalizations are as robust as what you would have with our American companies, but you don't see them because they really only focus on China. So there are a lot of other companies in the emerging markets that focus on their domestic marketplaces that if we hired an emerging markets manager, most of their portfolio would be on companies that focus internally.
What can I have? I guess
All right, thank you.
if you had a situation, and this is going way back, like a Cuba per se, where you have companies and countries who are investing in there, and then all of a sudden there's a coup, and the new regime says, "Hey, we're shutting everything down and we're kicking everybody out." Then there goes the funds that were put into there was pretty much a lost cause at that time.
Yep.
Kind of like Chairman Moore said in regards to what's going on now with the renegotiation of the treaties and things, not treaties, but the different tariffs and things that have been signed. I guess, and then the threat even to the United Nations now from our government, which is saying that they're going to scale back with their involvement in helping out with some of these other countries. How was that going to affect? How would that affect, should I say, one of the emerging managers or emerging markets?
Yep.
I know, and also, I'm sorry, one caveat. And sometimes they're known to inflate their economies as well. So you don't know kind of a lot of what you're dealing with.
Sure.
Kind of.
At the end of the day, most of these countries still have modest stock markets. You've seen that happen within the past 5 years with Venezuela and Argentina, where you had nationalization and you had hyperinflation in those respective countries. But again, most of the portfolio is still probably going to be invested in, let's say, China or South Korea, to a great extent also India. And the countries where you potentially will have coups tend to be lower on the market capitalization, so the percentage that you're going to invest in them by their nature is probably going to be modest. But those are definitely the right questions to ask because it's all headline risk. So we can't manage that headline. What it comes down to is the managers themselves that are going to have to decide what countries to invest in and what companies in those countries to invest in.
And what you have in front of you, Mr. Moore, what they have in front of them is the memo that we discussed in the Finance Committee meeting, and it just shows a breakdown between the different indexes, developed markets, emerging markets, and then what are considered frontier markets. And when you start talking about like a Venezuela, countries like that, those are frontier markets, and they're much further along the risk scale. We wouldn't be investing in those frontier markets. We would be in that middle section, the emerging markets that are.
So with the emerging markets, and once we hire a manager to manage that part of the portfolio, we won't be dictating as far as which countries they go into, how they would do that.
No.
So it's very possible. So are they just mandated to just stay in this list where it says the emerging markets, or would they be able to dabble in like the frontier and also the standalone market? So they wouldn't. So it would be their call, basically.
Right.
So we have no control over.
Yes, just like we have right now with the domestic managers.
Okay.
It's not our call for them to say, well, you're a large cap manager, which means 100% of your portfolio should only be in companies that are greater than 50 billion, let's say.
Okay.
That's not going to be the case. So oftentimes you will have managers that may have exposure to frontier, but it's not going to be a dramatic piece because for them it's about risk management also. If they have a lot of stocks in countries that have a lot of political risk or that have some sort of economic risk, it could potentially affect their performance. So on a risk-adjusted basis, they're going to have maybe potentially a little bit of exposure, but the vast majority of the exposure is going to be in the more developed emerging markets.
But it would be their call.
It would be
based
their
on
call.
where
Yes,
they
that's
play.
right.
Okay.
So do they not have kind of like a framework that they could give us that says these are the markets where we potentially will go, and these are the ones where we just won't go? Would we know that up front as we're bringing in the different
We
managers?
would, although that could change over time. Because the benchmarks also change over time, right? So.
Good. So page 7 summarizes our recommendations. So first, so on the top is our basic Excel sheet you've seen with the cash flow model, right? And so column A is our asset classes. We have our global international, which will become purely international, non-US. Then our emerging markets. So the thought process is, as we go out and build our emerging market bucket, we would take assets from our international global to fund that. So if you go all the way over to column H, that's our over allocation, under allocation. So as of December, we were over allocated roughly about $59 million on international and under allocated about $25 million on emerging markets. So as we roll this out, the funds will come from that international bucket to the emerging market bucket, just to let you know what we're thinking of, where the assets would move from. So the first recommendation is to move the First Eagle Overseas Global to the international fund. That would be another commingled fund what we're in, so probably another limited partnership agreement. We'd have to have Cynthia review it. The language should be the same. I don't know if it is, but it's the same company, so it should be the same. That's a process that we'd have to go through. And the second recommendation, number 2, is to post a public search for an emerging markets equity manager. We'd look for both passive, active, and emerging managers as well. So we'd ask for all 3 of those. And we'd post it on our website. It would go on your website. It'd be up for about a month or so, and then come back in another couple of months and walk through the list and come to some short list. And then have finals presentations after that.
So we're saying the amount of money we're looking to play within that arena is a little bit over $25 million.
Correct.
For the emerging market.
5%.
And that's just basically just bringing the system back in line with the target allocations, which you got listed under number 1.
Correct.
Okay.
The finance committee met on this on yesterday, and it recommended also that we go with the recommendation.
Okay.
Well, because we approved the target allocation, we've already, in essence, agreed that we want to go into the emerging markets, so now we just need to make it happen.
Yeah.
All right. Item C, you have WCM investment management request.
Yes, we're doing that? Okay. So, is it in that packet?
Yes, in the agenda
Handouts.
under consultants, there is a letter from DAHAP regarding this request from WCM, and I'll just put a reminder that this request that they are seeking, they would like to exceed a limit in our IPS. Currently, our IPS limits managers to having 5% of the portfolio invested in any one company. And they have since inception have always had an exception where they could go up to 10%, and it's really related to their style of management, but they were allowed to go up to 10%. Historically in the past, that the exception, granting it, was something that was done behind the scenes, and I felt it was important that you all know what's going on and that you approve to continue to allow them to exceed the maximum, and it is still within the PA 314 limits as far as maximum amounts in any one company, because it's only 10% of our portfolio value, not 10% of the outstanding stock of that particular company.
It's 10% of their portfolio value, which is a small percentage of.
I meant
yeah.
ours as in the system.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah, so the way we looked at this is, so WCM is a concentrated portfolio, roughly 30 stocks, as Deborah said. They go hand in hand with First Eagle. First Eagle is our other international manager that is very conservative. They currently hold 21% cash and they've got a lot of gold. They're a super conservative manager. So to pair that with a super conservative manager, we want a little bit more of an aggressive manager on the international side. So WCM fits that bill. Regarding the 10%, if you look back, so on the letter, on the second page, we have a table of every time they exceeded the 5% threshold. Now they've never gotten to 10%. The highest they've gotten is on March 31st, 2016, 6.13%. So 6%. So they've never gone up to 10. Talking to them offline, they said, well, you know, we are not targeting and very rarely go up to 10. But they said we do generally exceed 5%. So they were asking for an exception of the 5%. We're comfortable with that. We've known the manager. They've managed this style in your portfolio since inception, and it's worked out well for them. So our recommendation is to grant the request or suggestion.
Which is what they were already doing anyway.
Which is what they were already doing anyway.
Just been brought to
And if
light.
10% is too much, I mean, we could pull it back to 8 or 7. I mean, they've never exceeded 6.5, so we could make it 7%, and that would still be, I think, fine.
Okay. Mayor?
I move that we accept our portfolio manager's recommendation for the enter the emerging market and the process for which he suggested the review.
Yes, sir.
I know the mayor moved, but I'm not sure when the discussion should happen about this. We, yesterday at the finance subcommittee meeting, discussed this item and came to a conclusion, at least I think there was some agreement that this is not a desirable move because we just approved our IPS that mandates that no manager exceeds the 5%. That was just 2 months ago, and therefore here we are 2 months after we approved and deliberated for a year so on the policy. We are granting a waiver to this manager and then another. So what we recommended yesterday is to see if we can amend the IPS, but you're going to see at PA 314, is that 10%
That's
now?
right. So PA 314 says that the system cannot hold greater than 5% of the outstanding stock of one company. What our IPS says is any portfolio manager can't hold more than 5% of the securities of one company. It's always, just to be clear, our IPS has always said no more than 5%. And since we've hired WCM in 2011, I believe it was, we've always allowed them to go up to the 10%.
But that notwithstanding, it is a violation of the IPS.
That is correct. It is an exception to the IPS,
Okay,
and it
it's
always
an
has
exception
been.
to IPS. The granting that we have done, the waivers in the past,
Yes.
were, but what I think it's important is that when we discuss the IPS and the respective provisions, this was one of the provisions was never brought up to us that, hey, listen, we have an investment manager out there that exceeds this. Therefore, again, I stand by what I can support what the mayor says if the board does as well, but I think that we should set a precedent here that what we approve matters, and if we, yes, David.
So, I apologize, I was at the finance committee yesterday, but one comment I would make regarding the IPS and the limitation that we put, this was actually a lot of discussion that happened between Deborah and staff with us, because we were trying to keep the IPS as structured as possible, capturing, let's say, 90% of the world out there. But there are going to be a fair amount of managers that have more concentrated portfolios that, unless we give them an exception, are going to exceed 5% of their portfolio in one holding.
And that's exactly my point. Why wouldn't we, since we're here, amend that section of the policy saying that let's raise it to 7.5, and we comply with PA 314, and we give that latitude to the manager?
So let me, if I can speak for Deborah, what her challenge there was that we don't want to necessarily manage to the zebra. meaning that if everyone's gonna, this is like a medical thing. So if you're looking for the exception and you have the latitude increased so much that you're trying to get 99% of the manager, then perhaps there are some managers there that you may not want to look at. So the intention was trying to keep some sort of guideline at 5% and then giving those exceptions as they come up, as opposed to managing to the great majority and including all the exceptions in that one fell swoop. We're comfortable either way, but that was some of the background discussion that occurred in order to get to the 5%.
What about amending the IPS, similar to where we have the prohibited transactions,
Hang on a
unless
second.
explicitly
Cynthia,
waived by
hang
the
on
board?
one
So we
Chairman.
could have a provision in the IPS that gives the board the latitude.
I was gonna ask him, can he put his, device on mute? Because of the feedback we get, we can barely hear.
What is it?
Can you hear us,
It
Walter?
might help. You want me to put it on mute?
Yeah, because we're getting a lot of feedback.
Can you turn it down? Maybe because if I put it on mute, then I won't be able to hear you.
Okay.
Can y'all turn
I
it
thought
down?
you should be able to hear us, but we wouldn't be able to hear you till you
You'll
speak.
still be able to hear
Is
us.
there a TV
Yeah.
or something?
Yeah, click it.
Okay, maybe I can just turn this phone off and maybe
Okay.
that might be causing the
Oh,
problem.
that might be
Okay.
it.
Training, Shelby, please. It's your assignment.
We need to just start talking.
It sounds like it's in a warehouse.
That's better.
All right, that's better.
better.
Can you still hear us?
You give us a
Tell
thumbs
them
up
that
if you
it's
can
it.
hear us.
Yeah, I'm trying to turn this.
Okay.
It's good.
Whatever you did worked. Okay.
You did?
Yeah.
We're good.
Okay.
Good.
All right, I'm sorry, Cynthia, continue on.
No, I just suggested that perhaps we could amend the IPS. Instead of giving a specified percentage, we could just say it's 5% unless the board, approves a deviation from this policy. Similar to what we have for the prohibited and permissible securities.
Yeah. We discussed this, and I agree with Mr. Nazarko, and I also had the same discussion even prior to, can you hear me good?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we had this discussion, I had it with Deborah prior to, as soon as I saw the word exception, it was a red flag to me. And so my immediate question to Deborah was, is there anything in our IPS that allows us to then make an exception? And she thought at that time that it was, but after further review, she saw that that wasn't there. And that was one of the things that Cynthia had brought up. I think is one of the things that perhaps could be a solution if, in fact, there was something in the IPS that would give the board the ability to grant, I don't like the word exception, but maybe we can come up with a better one, because that if it's a cold word to me, if it's a red flag, it's going to be to somebody else. But just simply put some language in there that under certain circumstances, the board could then do something a little different than what the IPS specifically says. If that could be done, then I would think that would give us the ability to do that in this situation. But I agree with Nevers wholeheartedly that until that is done, for us to violate our IPS, there's no sense in us having a rule if we're gonna violate the rule ourselves.
Yeah, I want
We're
to
not
know.
violating, we're bending it to the point that it's almost violating. Put it that way.
Could we use the word deviate? Is that on your Cynthia, on your document there that you were reading from? Is the
Yeah.
word we use on the other part deviate?
No, it says unless explicitly waived by the board.
Right.
So
Okay,
under
yes,
each
you-
individual asset class, where we tell them what they can invest in, when it says diversification, each section would be changed to read, no individual portfolio shall hold more than 5% of its assets or 1.25 times the index's weight, whichever is greater, and the securities of any single entity without the express written consent of the board, and that would be changed for each asset class. Is that acceptable?
Is that acceptable?
I believe so. At least then we adhere to the policy. Yeah.
Okay. So you guys would be doing two resolutions, one to approve the amendment to the policy, and then the other to
grant the
allow
waiver.
the WCM exception.
Right.
Okay, now what do we do with the mayor's?
Yeah, withdraw or modify it.
Well, it was never seconded to it.
Right, I know that, but hey, we like to let you withdraw.
Don't need to. We'll go ahead with the other discussion.
So you'd like a motion then for, to amend the IPS?
I offer the motion.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, ayes have it.
Now the mayor's motions.
Okay. Now you said it was two motions that we needed.
Yeah, the second one our mayor's making.
I'm making the motion I made before.
Yeah.
Do I need to restate that, or do you have that?
It's actually item D and under new business. Yes, ma'am.
I'll second that.
Bob,
Guys,
yeah.
again.
I think the motion that is written in here should be changed a little bit to say 10% of their portfolio or WCM's portfolio, so the motion can stand on its own. Anybody that reads this, gets it under Freedom of Information or online, doesn't have to question what portfolio it's talking about. Now, we all know what it is.
Well, that's why we put WCM, the name of the investment manager, into the resolution, but.
I know, but it says to invest up to 10% of the portfolio in one company. Just clarify, it should stay their portfolio or the WCM portfolio.
We can make that change.
And then also, another way to even enhance it would be, provided it doesn't exceed 10% of the total portfolio or whatever, which is probably
Well,
get 314.
WCM is clear enough. I think that we don't have to keep on beating it down.
Pardon?
I think WCM, like you first said, is clear enough.
Okay.
I accept that change.
And I will second the amended motion to include that. Just,
So we're
So
changing.
what is the amendment, so we're all clear?
We're changing this resolution to say, continue to allow WCM requests to invest up to 10% of
Here.
their portfolio in one company. Okay, we'll do.
Everybody clear on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we had a motion and we had a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it.
That's it for our section.
We good?
I think we're good for section 5. Just prelims come up.
Now you need a motion for the RFP, if we're under subject.
That is actually under new business. If you'd like to do it now, that's fine, but those two, the recommendations that they made are resolutions under new business, so that's it.
We do it now.
I move to be going to do it now.
Okay.
We have a move and support to move up a new business item to now, which is an agenda change.
Yeah.
We're doing pretty good on time wise anyway, you know, to me, we just followed in order. But we did have a motion, so I can't ignore that, so it's a motion and a support. All in favor to move the item up? Any opposed? All right, so the item's been moved up.
I'm sorry, who moved and supported?
Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay. Now move to accept, approve the resolution, P. With the RFP.
first she moved, the first move was to
Move it up.
move it up, and now she's moving
Okay.
the resolution.
For the RFP?
I
Yes.
support that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, ayes have it. Okay.
And then there's also item C, Mayor, that goes along with that.
I move item C.
Support. We had the mayor and Bowman. Moved
Thank
and
you.
support. Okay, all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, ayes have it. All right, we're still under consultants.
thought they're done.
No, I think we're done.
Do you have any comments about the upcoming manager review next month? Any-
No, we hope to get a little more action out of the roundtable. Hopefully they'll be a little more talkative this time.
Oh, the agenda came out last night. I had a question, just for information, but we committed to core real estate, and I know not all the money's been drawn down, and probably not a whole lot of returns or anything, but at some point in time, would we expect to see the real estate managers at one of the manager reviews?
Yeah, I believe we're scheduled now for the September one.
September
We'll have all
one
of
would
them at the September.
that'd be enough activity to.
Yeah, we'll have them for all about a year.
Okay.
And so what we were thinking, and Deborah brought this up, we would try to keep the asset classes, similar asset classes together. So have all the real estate in the same day, because the terminology will remain the
So
same.
they can all meet their competitors on it.
Yes. They meet them all the time anyway.
I know,
Yeah.
they're all, probably some of them all work for each other.
Yeah.
All right, we good with the consultants? All right, let's move to item number 6, to reports, committees.
Sure. So neither the relocation nor the personnel committee met this month, but the finance committee did meet yesterday. They did review the international and emerging markets rebalancing, which is what you voted on today. They took a preliminary look at the list of directed brokerage firms, but they want to come back in March when they have more information as to how much is actually being directed to the brokers and what the participation rate is for the different managers. If you'll recall, we started that program back up as of September 13th. So there really is only 3.5 months of activity right now, which is not necessarily enough time to make a rational judgment about it. They did review with the consultant the recommendation regarding WCM. They reviewed all the monthly reports. They did review the value add real estate. It's the committee's position that we would continue to kind of work on that, and they have directed the consultant to, this consultant brought in a short list of investment or value add managers, and the committee directed that they would identify 3 value add funds and 3 real estate debt funds to bring back to the committee for consideration, and the committee is going to bring that back before the board once they've had time to review that. The committee did briefly discuss investment management fees, and that is something that they would like to look at as well as we go into continuing the rebalancing process, is to look at the fees that we're paying to the investment managers and seeing if whether or not there's room for negotiation with those. They reviewed all the information regarding the healthcare waiver. The information was emailed to you all. It was a letter from the city's attorney regarding the healthcare waiver. We requested an opinion from our attorney, and you all saw that. So that is moving forward. I'll discuss it a little bit more in my report. They did look at the fees that Gabriel Roeder has put forth as their fee to calculate the Social Security offset. I don't know if all of you are aware, but I know some of you who are retired may be aware, we have an option in the ordinance whereby a member can take a Social Security offset to their pension. In that case, they would receive a higher than normal amount prior to age 65, and then at age 65, it would drop below what they would otherwise receive, but they receive the same amount in pension payments over their lifetime. It's just the timing of the payments. At one point, Gabriel used to do that calculation for us for free, but with all the recent retirements, I just went to follow up with them, just in case any member wanted to see that calculation, and now they're charging a fee of $415. Go ahead.
And how many people take that option?
We haven't had a member take that option in probably 10 years. Currently, there's only 2 on the payroll who still have it, but we do offer it. It is part of the ordinance, and so it was just important that we kind of know like what we need to do as far as with Gabriel Roeder Smith with all of the recent retirees. I mean, it's just another option. So.
And they know about this option when before they retired when they come in.
The members know about it. We inform them at the time of their retirement interview. For most members, it's not an issue because, you know, they're coming in a month or 2 months prior to their retirement. If they come to their interview and say, hey, I want to see those calculations, we can still get them done before we put on the payroll. The difference with the early retirees is they had to make a choice. If you want to see those Social Security offset calculations, we can do that, but it's going to delay by a month when you get your payment. And so far, no one has, you know, willing to put off their payments, you know, a month to, and maybe some of them just weren't interested in the option, to be honest. I don't know, but no one has requested to see the Social Security offset options.
Yeah, is that form gonna be changed so that Social Security offset is there? Because when I got ready to retire some years ago, more than 10, that was like a dirty secret that the city had and nobody, you know, and we were all going around whispering about, you know, there's a Social Security option that's not listed on your form. And they don't want to tell you about that in the retirement office.
I wasn't aware of that,
And
Trustee Swayzer, but that was one of the questions that I asked was the member data software that we lease from Gabriel, you know, it'll print out an estimate which shows you the different options, and then there's another page which is an explanation of each option. And we've asked, can you include an explanation of the Social Security offset on that form? They said, yes, we can do that, but you probably want to have that explanation as a standalone form. But yes, they can do that, and it'll be part of the retirement paperwork going forward.
Okay.
It's $450 overall, not per occurrence.
$415
Oh, 15
for each calculation.
for each one.
And that would be borne by the member.
Because it's going to depend on their precise age and all kinds of other factors. You can't do a ballpark.
That's right.
Social Security offset because it makes a
Okay.
huge difference if I retire when I'm 60
Right.
as opposed to 63 or 58 or whatever, what that offset needs to be, and there's no way they can.
Right, and the actuary, you know, the member has to bring in a copy of that estimate that people get from the Social Security Administration that tells you what your future benefit, an estimate of that benefit. You have to get that from the Social Security Administration in order for the actuary to do the calculation as well. And the ordinance is very specific. It doesn't matter when you start collecting Social Security. At age 65, that benefit's going down, so.
Question, being a charge from the actuary and being actually is a report, actuarial report, why would the system be responsible for the cost instead of the member who wants to go through that route?
I said the member would be responsible for that charge. To my knowledge, the
Oh, okay.
system,
I didn't hear that part.
it's like a DRO. Those
Okay.
calculations are borne by the member.
Okay, good, thanks.
So the
I
member's
didn't
gonna
hear that
pay
part.
$450?
In the past, it was free, but I would expect that the member would pay it unless you or Cynthia felt that that was a system cost that the system could pick up.
I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
I'd have to
And
look,
we can
but
look
certainly
into that.
Adros, we can
Well,
pass the cost on.
Sure.
I mean,
What if they didn't elect it, and they paid the cost? If they elected it, we ate the cost. That option.
No, it doesn't
Say
make
that
sense
again.
either.
Say that again.
I said, what if the member wanted that calculation done, and if they turned it down, then they pay the cost. If they elect that option, then the system pays the cost.
It's still the report benefits them.
Well, I know, but, I mean, you don't want everybody coming, if we were gonna pay the cost, we wouldn't want everybody coming in and having the calculation done.
Well, I'm saying we
having
should
no
not pay the
intention
cost
of
under
what
any
we're doing.
circumstances.
I think the general feeling is that the member should be paying if they want it.
So we have options available, but they have to pay to select.
Yes, right, that's.
That doesn't make sense either. I mean, I understand it's a lot of money, but, you know,
All right. There.
But it,
take the option away.
go ahead.
Eliminate the option. I mean, we're better funded than the Social Security system. Why would somebody want to bank their future on Social Security by taking a reduced payment?
Because some people are poor and need every dime they get. And if, I don't know what the reduction is, because I did not take that option, although I've heard about it. But I know several people who took that option because they needed that money for as many years as they could. They said, well, I gotta retire, but I gotta have as much money as I can. They don't wanna immediately go out and get a whole full-time job, cause if your money's not good, you got to go get a real job. You might have to leave this other one and say, hey, I don't like you people, but we'll go to this other one and get a little bit of money. We'll get as much of this little bit of money I can. But when I get 65, and if they know of a lot of people in their family, like mine, don't live to 65. Hey, let me get as much money as I can, because when I'm 65, if I get to see it, it's gonna be a yes, thank you, Lord. But if not, it's gonna be, well, that's the way the family goes.
Go ahead, Mary. She's been having her hand up for a while, Mary Water.
Thank you for the verbal report. I'm just wondering what the written report is. Okay.
If you look under the executive director's report, the email to and from the actuary with their responses is there, and the email is in black and white, so you can't necessarily see the response, but if you read through it, they're saying, yes, we can do this. It's $410 per calculation. So the responses are in that email.
Okay. There are minutes or notes from that meeting, apparently, though, and I'm asking if a written report or can I
I'm
receive
sorry,
the
no,
report?
I do not take notes at either committee meeting.
What are you referring to right there?
This is just my executive director report, and then this is the agenda from yesterday, so I make sure that.
So do we have a quorum of
Board
committee
members? No.
at that meeting?
A quorum of the committee, yes, 5.
Okay, so are we responsible for having written minutes?
I don't believe we are. And you can confirm that, but I don't believe that the Open Meetings Act requires that we.
I think it's up to the board, you guys have discussed this in the past. I don't know that anyone's ever had a formal motion. But
I'm going to request to receive the written minutes from our committee reports from this point.
Well, first we got to decide if we're gonna start taking meetings at these committees in order to have minutes available, so. But if I.
Yes, sir.
In regards to what.
Don't talk as loud as others. Could you speak up with this?
Sure.
So I can maybe hear you a little bit better?
On regards to what Billy was saying, about the members having that option, I think you can make a better decision when you have options. So I think that option should be made available to the retirees, whether they decide to take it or not, and they would know the cost that's associated with it. Because I understand what you're saying, Billy. You know, a lot of times you might want to take a lot more of your money up front because you might not be in a position to enjoy it on the back end. So each individual need to decide that for themselves, but we still need to at least give them that option and let them know exactly what the cost associated with it.
Okay. You skipped over my question, so you said that the board has to decide that. I'm going to, I'll do this in writing too, but I'm going to inform you that I'm going to request that we do have, and I'll receive the minutes of committee meetings from this point forward. So I'll do that in writing, and the board can take it up for the way they choose. Okay.
Oh, are we all set?
She's gonna send a written request.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
But I'm doing it verbally right here.
Yeah. Okay, so, and just to be clear, the recent retirees were in a very particular situation. Their pensions were going to be effective January 1, no matter what.
Right.
But it wasn't until they came in to do their interview that we said, oh, and by the way, there's the Social Security option. If you want it, you'll have to wait until next month to start receiving your payments. So we did afford them the opportunity to see the calculations. I just wanted to make sure you understood that.
But they didn't see like $1.06.
They didn't see the calculations, correct. That was it. If you want to see the calculations, we need to send this to the actuary. And we can't set you up on payroll, because once you retire, you can't change your benefit or your option. So you'll have to wait another month to start receiving your payments. And so that was a trade-off. But I don't know if that factored into anyone's decision.
But they were afforded the
Opportunity to delay it and see the calculations.
Aubrey?
just a quick question, if you can, when you say interview, what do that consist of?
Sure.
I mean, and I guess the reason why I'm asking you that, at some point, where's the HR department in dealing with the retirees prior to them retiring? So all of the information is coming from the retirement office. The HR department don't have any of this type of information to share with the retirees prior to them retiring, or do they have to come to the office here to get all of the information?
So
You
right,
asked them
we
what the process is.
Right.
for the retirement process from start to finish, that is completely within the retirement office staff's responsibility. Once we set someone up, we'll go to the city and say, hey, send us all their passports, send us all their information. Did they have any unpaid leaves? So we can do their final benefit calculation. We'll go back and make sure we have all the information. But with respect to signing them up for retirement, making sure they have all the information, that's completely within the retirement system's purview.
So do they have an HR department?
The city?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's been a while since I worked, but especially since I was hired in, it seems to me that even at the time that we were hired in, we were given a handbook that kind of explained to us those general, this is who you see about this and this is who you see about this. And HR would have had the information in general that,
That's right.
In order to set your pension, you're gonna need to see the retirement office. So, I mean, it's, as far as I recall, always been done that HR did the hiring and orientation and all of those kinds of things. And even to the point of explaining that if you're here this long, there will be retirement benefits, but then to the actual retirement benefit, deferring everything to the retirement office.
Thank you, that's correct.
Trustee Aaron?
I just wanted to make after working here almost 13 years, just to let you know that we've had people come to meetings and are very upset because they took the Social Security offset, and then all of a sudden at 65, they think they're getting their full retirement benefit along with that Social Security money, and it's really put them off guard.
They forget.
Because they forget.
Right.
Yeah.
And we've had we've had people at meetings, we've had people call up. And, so only, I can say in 13, only one person just took it in stride. When we sent the letter, we heard nothing back, but any other time, we did hear back and people were not happy because all of a sudden,
The adjustment.
it's a big adjustment for them because it's usually a dramatic decrease in the amount of their benefit.
It doesn't come at a good time in life.
And it doesn't come, and normally they're not gonna be working, and then it's really, just.
Right, so their estimate says, oh, you're going to get 5,000, but they broke it up, so they're getting 3,500 before 65 and 1,500, but they don't.
Right, and I think, and I didn't have the figures on what my Social Security offset would be, but because of the age I was when I retired and how many years I knew I would get COLA, mine is going to work out that my COLA will be ending somewhere near the time when I start collecting Social Security. So it's like, then I'll just be getting my raise by getting Social Security added on top of my pension. But it was a thoughtful process. I was aware of the option. But it felt to me like, well, this would work out much better.
And we always mention, we always say, you have this, but.
Y'all all have said it since those 13 years.
You can't hear?
But enough.
This is more for information, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now the trustees can't hear you. Now we need you to turn up just a little bit. Oh, Never's got you? Okay.
Can you hear me now?
We got
Never's working on
He's
you.
working.
I think can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, turn it down.
I think the problem was that, we were actually listening to other through the phone. And now that I turned the phone off, you can't hear me.
It was some background noise at your end that was disturbing us.
But you can hear me now?
Yeah.
It's all fixed.
You good?
Okay. So my question was, in terms of the Social Security offset, are we required to take any action, or is this for information?
This is informational only.
All right.
One of the questions I have is that, so Jane, you had this experience with all these upset people, or these numerous upset people. Is there something that could be done so that they don't be so unknowledgeable? Because it was not a well-known fact. Now, it's a good thing that Jane Gaffney knew, but it was not a well-known fact in the police department and for the city. When I was the president of PMEA, it was not a well-known fact that you could get the Social Security option. Somebody brought it to me and said, "Look, Billy, this is something extra you can get." I said, and I know one of the ladies that took it, and she said, "I'm gonna take it." And I said, "Go ahead, do what you gotta do. I ain't working." Like that. I'm gonna be all right with what I got.
Billy,
But I need somehow these people that are upset to be able to know, and even if it's a year or
Before they get ready to.
before they get ready to go down, look, you might want to adjust your life because you're gonna go down 2,000.
My understanding though, Mr. Cherry, is that these people that are upset that they took it and they were not fully aware that at 65 their pension drops or stays wherever they took. That's a permanent election. So once you take that option, it stays with you for as long as you live.
Right.
And it's cannot be undone.
Right.
So those people were upset that they didn't think that this was a permanent option, it seems to me. So the best solution for that is that to sign that thing.
That's what Deborah's saying. So going forward, you know, that will be changed. You know, we can't do what was done in the past.
Yeah.
But going forward, she's stating that, you know, it can be printed out for them.
That's correct. And with every interview that we do, on almost the top of the list is to be very clear. Once you retire, you can never change your beneficiary, and you can never change your option. And we kind of nail that home, and now we actually make them sign the checklist that we told them that this is the case. And going to Trustee Swayzer's question is, yes, each year we look for duty disability conversions, we look for pop-ups, we look for age 65 Social Security offsets, and we send them letters at the beginning of the year.
Is that the beginning of the year before they're 65?
It's the year that they're being converted.
So if I turn 65 this year, you would send me one January 1st.
January, February, we try to do the notices.
Okay, but what about sending in 60 when you're for 64? Because I'm telling you, it takes a minute to be thinking about going back to work. I know it would take me a minute to think about, I gotta go get a full-time job and like it, no matter what, because that's what work is. You got to like that job.
We only have 2 left, and what I will do, if it would please you, I will send them a notice this year, reminding them, and then make a note to send them a letter at age 64. Absolutely. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I just think they need to be warned.
All mine settled. We didn't keep this
Yeah.
down on the road.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. So everybody was heard. Okay.
Okay, they did review, there's a FOIA request in the consent agenda, and the trustees did review that. I gave them an update on the temporary. Mary, I told you I'm very pleased with the work that she did, but she actually got a full-time job, so her last day will be March 9th, and we will not look to replace her. We have other things coming up. We want to get through the early retirements, and we certainly want to get prepared for the audit. And then the next kind of big project we're going to have is getting Philip trained on how to do finals, because obviously I can't review my own work, so he needs to be able to review and approve the benefits that I've done. So, and we'd like to have them all done by the end of the summer. So that's the next big project, and the records retention project is probably going to be put on hold. We've gotten everything that was in the office scanned and moved back to storage. So as far as the records retention project, we're going to put that on hold and kind of focus on those more immediate things. But I would say thank you to Mary if she was here. She really did a great job for us. Northern Trust, it was in the consent agenda. The new client representative, Larry Fumarolo, he was made our permanent a representative going forward. And both committees had decided that this year, instead of doing a resolution for the 2 council appointments, I'm just going to send a notice to the council notifying them that their 2 positions expire, the expiration date, which is March 31st, and reminding them that the ordinance gives them the discretion to appoint the new trustees. And normally on the agenda, I think it's still in the production calendar, that you would be doing a resolution. So you're not doing that this year, but we are notifying the council, okay? And that was it for the Finance Committee.
And could you say which 2 trustees are up for?
Yes, sir. Trustee Williams and Trustee Bowman are up for reappointment.
No escaping like that.
And we thank you too.
Okay. All right, so we had trustee reports? Or you, where you at, Deborah?
No, that was the end of the Finance Committee report, and that was the only committee report we had this month.
Okay. Trustees? Trustee?
I got one. I would like to go to DC on the 21st for the legislature. And to give me an opportunity to learn more about what's going on within our government with the taxes. And I would like the board to approve it and it's for May the 21st. The IFBP is from May the 21st through the 22nd in DC.
I so move that we approve his
Support.
his trip.
All in favor? We have a move and we have a support.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Walter? Pardon me?
Can I add Walter to that?
All right.
Sure. Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chair,
Oh.
go ahead.
Chairman Moore has asked to attend that conference also. I'm sorry, I should have said something before.
Sure.
Can we
Okay.
Yeah.
just do another resolution?
You want to speak for himself?
I don't think, he might not be able to hear.
Okay.
The one
Walter,
from
can
May
you hear?
13th.
Can you hear us?
I hear,
Trustee.
Okay.
but it's really muffled.
Okay.
Did someone
Okay,
support him?
Okay, who supported?
Shelton has asked to go to a conference in Washington DC in May. Have you also asked for that, go to that one too?
May.
Was it?
Yeah,
You mean
I
the
sent
part of
something
NC
to Jane indicating it's a legislative conference.
Yeah, it's
And
the
Just
the
a
conference
Yeah.
is around legislation that's coming out of the federal level that will affect pensions. And I just thought that would be an excellent conference for us to go to be able to know what they're doing on the Hill. And also during that visit, it's my intent to try to meet directly with our federal legislators, get an appointment with them so that we can meet directly with them and perhaps find out what's happening in the area of pensions, but also to get an idea too of what we can expect across the board.
Oh, you moved I'll support that.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's invalid. I'm not authorized to do that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Are we just doing one for both?
I was trying to save his voice.
We'd already voted on the other one,
Okay,
so.
who moved and supported the other
All right.
one?
Sheldon, the first one?
The
Yeah,
first
the
one
first
was
one.
Billy
That was
and
Billy
Nazarko.
and
Thank you.
never supported.
And then the second one was Sheldon.
Okay, I appreciate that, thank
Okay.
you.
No problem.
All right, so for the second motion to add Chairman Moore to go to that, we had a move and we had a support. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposed? All right. Okay, so ayes have it, Mr. Moore and Mr. Albritton will both be attending the conference.
I was granted that I'm reappointed. I'm not going to go to NC per se, but there's an educational portion of that, which is TED, Trustee Educational Seminar, which will be the 2 days prior to the actual NC conference. I wanted to attend that one. So that's granted.
Okay.
And there is in your handouts, I just put it in for the picture, but there's a TED's handout in your,
Actually, Teresa and Bill early.
Well, at least we know they was at the meeting.
And
Yeah, and so you don't have to be making jokes about us, that we are national.
All right.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
we do have a request,
Oh,
from
I had
trustee,
another one too.
Bowman,
Yes.
so we need a movement of support.
I move.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, any
I don't think
opposed?
we have to do
All right,
that.
so trustee Bowman is pending,
I'm not gonna go.
pending,
Yeah.
reappointment. Okay.
Okay, I don't think we, oh, I'm sorry.
I think that was approved, wasn't that approved
And-
conference on that?
It's a group
I'm not
conference,
gonna
but
do
he's
the,
not,
He's
he's
not doing
gotta
the
wait
full
for
Yeah.
his appointment.
He doesn't want to.
Right.
He's
Okay.
going
The
to
funding
the
doesn't
work.
come till April.
Okay. And I didn't want to go to the full and see the
Right.
conference that whole week. Just
Okay, who moved and
2 days for
supported?
the educational portion of it.
Mr.
I know that
Nazarko
the secret
and
was
the mayor.
approved, but
Thank you.
I don't know
Right,
that
yeah, but
portion.
if you're just doing it just partially.
Yeah, the educational portion.
I'm sorry.
Mr.
But,
Nazarko
but
and the mayor.
travel arrangements, you'll just wait and make
Right,
after
until after
finding out what
that.
council does.
Okay.
I don't, yeah, works for
All
me.
I'm sorry.
So we're good on trustee reports? All right, chairman report?
I don't have anything, I'm good.
All right. Item number 7, executive director.
Okay, so, first of all, under section 7B, there are no assets in transition. Keep in mind that we will have a capital call from Invesco on April 1st for $7.5 billion. And as previously agreed, we will take that money from First Eagle. So First Eagle, right now, I think that the total international is over by 59 million.
Yep.
We're taking 7.5 million of that to fund the Invesco real estate, and that will happen April 1. The member data and preliminary financial statements was sent to the actuary on February 12th. I will probably send to her updated financials near the end of April in time for them to present you with the draft of the valuation at the May meeting. We did go through the workers' comp audit, and our premium is actually being reduced from $561 annually to $543. In your handouts, there, I sent you an email regarding the Open Meetings Act. The handbook, I thought, puts the act into layman's term, and I thought it might be useful for you, so that's included. There were 2 reports under the report section that were previously emailed to you. We did receive all of the manager acceptance forms for the investment policy statement. When we revised the IPS, we send it to all the managers and ask them to sign off acknowledging their fiduciary status, and we received it from all of the managers. There were 3, Invesco, Principal, and First Eagle, who wanted to have some different language, and we did run those past the attorney, and she has approved those, so everyone has responded with a signed statement. First Eagle did accept our request that there be 2 signers on any request for a transaction with that fund. And this is just a reminder, but the $400 supplemental we will need to have a supplemental analysis to continue that $400. I think the city requests it maybe in March of each year, but we want to have that in place so that if it is the city's intent to continue that we move forward with the request to the actuary. But again, this is just a reminder.
He didn't hear.
It's just a reminder that you'll need to request that we have that analysis prepared.
Okay.
And just to give you an update on the deferred member early retirement, so we were able to get everyone who was scheduled in February into the office in February and onto the payroll. Everyone else is scheduled to come in on or before March 16th. The 4 out-of-state members, we have mailed their information to them via certified mail. And we expect to reach our goal of having everyone on the payroll by the end of March. Did anyone have any questions about either the city's letter to us or Cynthia's email? Did anyone have any questions about any aspect of the deferred member early retirement?
I had a question because this letter from Dear Mayor and Nevers is signed by a guy named Richard. It's not on anybody's letterhead. And I assume this is supposed to be a legal opinion, but is this the normal way he does business? And who is Richard?
Richard is the attorney for the city, and I forgot his last name, I apologize.
Or.
Moore.
Is this the way he normally sends his?
No, this was sent in an email. I'm not sure who printed this out and how, but this was sent in an email to Mayor and I, and had full information as to whom and why. And again, I don't know how is this?
That's how it came to me. It's a Word document, and that's exactly how it came to me. So I didn't modify it at all.
Who sent it to you?
You did.
You.
I did.
So that explains it.
So where, no, hold on. Where's my email? No, because this was not. Is my email attached? You know, attach my email to this?
No, your email is not attached. I just printed out the Word document that you sent in the email.
I just had one question
Okay.
about, and I think it's the same list of, all these early retirements,
Sure.
I've gotten very confused.
Sure.
But, because I think it was in Keon's request where there was the list of ages and
Oh, I had a question about that too.
the actuary says that they have to be 43 and there's one person on the list who was 42.
And he had,
Does he-
retired with
he should
7
have a-
years and 7 months, and what is the partial plan termination was mine, what was,
Sure.
David Jackson, able to retire with 7 years and 7 months.
So the retiree list that was in the FOIA request is every early retirement since March of 2009.
Okay.
And when the emergency manager was making those decisions, he didn't necessarily have age 43. There were some
Okay.
people who had
Okay. Because that was the only one I noticed,
Yes.
and I thought, but then, you know,
Yes.
like I read that and kind of glanced at that. And
That's
then-
not a January 1 retirement, correct? The retirement date?
The retirement date is, no, that was back in October, you're
Okay.
right, of 2013, okay.
So,
All right,
yeah, so
the actuarial report that refers specifically to age 43 was only for those January people. and
Exactly,
that
and the
got it.
FOIA includes everyone
Okay,
who
all
had
right, got
early
it.
retirement.
Because I was like,
Yes, ma'am.
how did that happen?
Yes.
Got it.
So it didn't matter how much time you had, if the emergency manager said you could retire,
Mhm.
you could basically get up out of here
Right.
with less, not 10 years.
That's right. So with Mr. Schimel, he was very aggressive in trimming the workforce. And, you know, I remember there was one in particular, it was for some non-union people. It was so narrowly defined. I think that one actually was age 43, but I think if you had like 13 years of service, because he was targeting this specific group of 6 people. And so he was very methodical in his. I think the earlier ones under Mr. Lieb and Mr. Schimel weren't as
Oh, wait a minute.
specific. I think 42 might be the youngest one that's on there.
That was the only one I noticed that was under age 43.
Which list are we, where's this list we're talking about?
It's
It's
under
under the consent agenda.
But I didn't have it
But this is
named.
by number. Though. What
Well,
number is
that's
this?
part of the partial plan termination, Billy.
Right, okay, right.
David Jackson is the
Right.
first plan contamination.
Yes.
Yes. And
And it said on, I'm gonna have notes here said, I don't know if it's, my writing's bad here, is it 9 years and 7 months or 7 years and 7 months?
it's, I believe David Jackson is 7 years, but as a result of the partial plan termination, everyone that was laid off in this particular period, and I believe that Cynthia can correct me if I'm wrong, it was 5 years prior to the date that they determined we had a partial plan termination. Everyone who was laid off in that period became immediately vested in their pension, no matter how many years of service that they had.
But being vested and drawing a pension, there are two different things.
At age 60, they get to start drawing that
So
pension.
David
Right, so
Jackson,
how did
because
David-
he's 60?
I'm sure he's 60.
Well, I don't
I'm
know.
sorry, look at the member.
I
Member
don't,
number 45.
no.
I
no,
can-
no,
She's
no,
looking,
no, no.
she's looking at this.
This guy, I had a note, I had sent Deborah a note about any question I had on the agenda, and she didn't respond, so.
I did.
You sent me a letter?
Yes.
Oh, I better look at that iPad, because it didn't come up here.
Yeah, I read it.
Yes, I
read
did
it.
respond, but go ahead with your questions. I'm happy to answer them. David Jackson is 60.
Oh, he's 60.
Yes.
He's 60. Yeah, but all the information's not here. It's on your iPad version and more information. But I didn't see the age, so I was like, wait a minute. With this partial plan termination, why does this man get retired for 10 years? Because 10 years was the number.
So anyone who is part of that partial plan termination and they have less than the 10 years, they get to go at 60. You know, and then it goes by their contract. If they were ASME and they could go with, what, 50 and 25 years. I think yours was this, the Teamsters was the same way. So it goes according to their contract, but less than the 10 years, they get to go.
Oh, I'm not a Teamster.
Okay.
We dispatches. We stand alone. We stand alone. No, we weren't never.
personally
We were never Teamsters.
You personally were a teacher's union at one point
No,
before you
no.
got to
So
dispatch.
were
No,
you at,
but you
Deborah,
never-
your report?
No, I was in PBA.
Because we just going back and forth, let's continue on and respect the time. Mayor has a question, turn it back
Well,
over
I
to
think you had
Deborah.
asked, was there any other comment about this, as we got into that discussion of this early retirement. So, I saw the email that we had from Rich Warren that you asked about. That was not went out to the, early retirees, ones who are eligible for that. I heard a question about that, was that what was sent out? No, it wasn't.
No, I didn't ask that. I didn't ask that.
Okay, well, let me also state this then. The letter from the mayor, I don't think you have in here, that was what was then sent out to the eligible.
I
group?
didn't receive that, that's correct.
Okay, so, it was sent out, you know, welcome to have a copy of it, however you want. But, that was sent out, stating what was the resolution of the, council, city council. We were following that, that the resolution did say that, to be eligible, that they have to sign this waiver. So we did state that in the letter. Then to give a little history of why this had been a little confused, just because it was handled in two different votes by the council instead of all at one time. So that's, one was done in December, the other one was done in January. So it's kind of confusion. But since then, since that letter went out, there is some rumor that's going on. Since that letter went out, at least one, maybe more, of the people who have come in to sign the waiver, and I'm not up to the latest number, but they come into the HR office, and a couple of them we've had to clarify that they received a rumor that somehow if they sign the waiver, that their $400 enhanced pension benefit would be
Discontinued,
cut,
yeah.
discontinued, which is entirely untrue. Okay. And so we've had to squelch that. I don't know what the purpose of that was or what's happening with that, but I wanted to also make that clear here in case anybody else was the same advised or had that information. So we do understand that that's not the case. Does everybody understand
But
what
you
it is?
understand also that the ordinance did not, the resolution did not modify the ordinance. And so the ordinance has to have another ordinance to modify it. Otherwise, it doesn't affect their retirement if they don't sign the waiver.
I'm not sure if you're making a legal opinion or because we were.
I'm not an attorney. I'm never
Good,
gonna be
good.
making a legal
All right.
opinion. It's probably like
That's
when you
right.
tell the people to sign the waiver,
That's
you're
right.
not an attorney either, so that's just your personal opinion.
May I finish my statement, okay, and whatever comments you want to make, Mrs. Simons. But I was just trying to clarify that, which letter went out. Wanted to clarify that rumor was not true, so we had to, a number of instances, inform people of that, so they weren't, scared by that, because that is not true. I stated, from the beginning of my first term, as mayor, that I would continue to protect that $400 enhanced pension benefit for all retirees, and have done that sequentially, so we will do that. But the other thing is that as mayor, I'm obligated to follow what our city council did pass, so we did the resolution. And so we're following that. We will also send out a follow-up letter to those we have received it by a certain date, and then so inform council of the ones we don't receive. We also did go to our pension attorney, and that's Rich Warren, that's the one we're talking to, so he could clarify
And talk to
that-
you about.
I'll finish my statement and then, we did get the opinion of Rich Warren, which also does verify council's position. So, to the extent that we'll receive or have received something different from Gers' attorney, that is not with my purview. As mayor, I'm obliged to follow what council did pass and what was still verified by our city attorney. So, just to clarify where we are.
And just to, if it's of any value to you, when we talk to the members about the $400, we're very simple and very clear. The $400 is payable to all retirees who enter pay status, and as of right now, is scheduled to end on August 31st of this year. And I'd be happy to send you guys our checklist, but a very wise man keeps reminding me that we have to stay in our lane, so we try not to do anything that's going to, overstep the city's position or in any way inhibit or harm what you're trying to do. So we just are very clear that everyone gets it and it's scheduled to expire.
Right, and I don't think Mayor said anything that you gave misinformation,
Oh,
whatever,
okay.
but someone
Okay.
of the group of 67 came to our office to sign the waiver,
Okay.
and then took back the desire to sign, because he said that he heard from some other members that if
Okay.
he signs, the $400 will go away.
Okay.
And I reiterate the mayor's position that there is no intention about touching the $400 on any current member of the system, or future members if it's going to be available. Not that we can.
Trustee Alberti.
What is the purpose of them signing the waiver? What do that do for the retirees?
In a nutshell, the purpose of the waiver is that they do not come back next year, this group of 67, one of them, and claim that now they are, because they are retired, they are entitled to receive the health insurance benefit. That's the only purpose of that waiver. They're not going to receive health insurance benefit until they reach the age of 60, which at that time they are eligible to draw health insurance from this new VIBA that we are about to create.
Trustee Sturgeon.
Isn't that
Trustee.
Isn't that in there? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, you can go ahead. Let him go ahead.
Isn't that requirement in the original ordinance?
The requirement is in the original ordinance. However, the ordinance is working against a bargaining agreement that these employees were under, and although the ordinance to some extent may control that, our position is that we don't want any legal expenses in the future just because one, two, or all 67 decide to come back and take the city to court for not providing health insurance. And remember, this group of 67 is included in the CIPRIA, all the analysis and all the reports that we have done with our actuaries to support the CIPRIA's 1,500 or so members, but the inclusion is as much as when they reach the age of 60. There is no provision, or the reports or all the analysis we did does not include this group of 67 retiring as early as next month or whenever we create that special VIBA. So again, because that now, if this group of 67 all of a sudden wants to join this new VIBA, or not wants, is allowed to, then that will take the computation to a different level. And that's why the council, 7-0, I believe, unanimously passed that resolution.
No, 6.
Okay, passed that resolution mandating that you sign the waiver, and I know there are rumors out there, that was one of them, and another one is that by signing this waiver, I'm giving up my constitution. No, nothing. You saying that I'm not going to take any legal action till I reach I'm going to get insurance when I'm 60, which that's what the ordinance says, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
All the waiver is trying to protect the future litigation.
I think what is important for us, though, as a board, we're not here and we can't be responsible for interpreting the law. We've gotten our legal opinion from our attorney, and the waiver in the city's position, hey, is valid from your position, but the issue is with the city council. It's not with this board. This board is only responsible for carrying out the ordinance as delivered to us. And so it's nothing that we can do in terms of the waiver, but what our responsibility is to enforce the ordinance that was passed.
Absolutely, and
We had,
Nor is the issue of future health care benefits for anyone, current retirees, age 60, whatever, or that's not the purview of this board. That's a separate,
Right.
I mean, that's on the city side, and with any future Viva board, should the Viva be set up.
Right.
It doesn't have anything to do with us.
Well, it does, it defines who's eligible to receive the benefit at the early age.
The ordinance does, but this board only administers pensions. We don't decide eligibility for health care. It's got nothing to do with us. We have no authority to decide who gets health care and who doesn't. That's between the city,
That's not an issue.
but that's,
Eligibility for what's one of the requirements to receive.
And in terms of waiver, we have nothing to do with the waiver.
right.
It's something that.
Because the waiver addresses the health care issue, which is not
it's not ours.
our issue.
our point, Mr. Chair, if I may, is that we're not telling the board at this point, or we brought this as informational, and it was on the agenda. We're not telling the board. However, we would like to, through the board, because we know you talk to the members, and there are now 67 or how many ever they are, pensioners. We want to make sure that the truth is out there, and this is one way to dispel the rumors. And we still, though, under the, we take the position that the waiver is an important legal document that we wish that all sign and we move on, and they continue on to sunset with the pension they receive.
So your purpose here today is just share information with the board?
At this point, not as interaction, and it was put from someone else, was not our, right?
No, it was on the agenda sheet.
It was on the agenda sheet.
Okay.
Okay, I got a question. I'm not, this doesn't affect me because I'm already getting my pension. But if I was one of those 67 or 70 or whatever the number is, say 67, if they don't sign the waiver, what you gonna do to them? Because all they have to do is, they entitled to their pension according to the ordinance. The resolution is just something that you want for lawsuits, or either to violate them, which would be my first theory if I was a person that was saying, hey, you go sign all these laws we can violate, and don't sue me because I'm gonna violate every last one of them, and then you can come see me later.
Yeah.
And make sure the goodness of my heart is okay.
We was under the executive director's report, and now we got into an open forum discussion. Okay, so we'll entertain the mayor, then we're gonna get back to the executive director.
Members, the CFO and I, we're just trying to give information and to pass that along to the board. I do object to Ms. Fraser's statement that what we're doing is trying to violate retirees. There is no intent, but because you said that now, I do want to state openly that I do object that characterization. The council, when they passed that resolution, had no intent to violate anybody, nor do I. So I just want to put that on the table here. But what it does do is that we know that we want the 67 in terms of getting the early retirement, but there are 61,033 other citizens of the city of Pontiac who deserve to have the right protection from potential litigation. This is the advice of our attorneys, and we have followed that, and the council has followed that, and I'm following that as mayor.
Okay, all right. Executive Director, where are you with your report?
That's all I have, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay, okay, because we're gonna keep going back and forth, and so the mayor, as well as the finance director, said their purpose is for informing this board of what has taken place, and so they didn't ask for a resolution, it was just informational purposes is what I've taken that they had given us. All right, so the executive director report has been concluded. What we'll do is look at item number 8, which is unfinished business.
Okay, so item A is the resolution to approve the emerging manager program policy. It was presented to you in January and emailed to you subsequent to that. This really just puts kind of the framework behind what we're already doing. This doesn't change anything on the ground. I think going forward, obviously with the rebalancing of the portfolio to the target allocation, we will be looking at all of the managers, but right now this is just so that we have a policy in place with respect